Okay. First things first. If the phone rings, I have to answer it. I'm sure you've all heard of the recent court decision in Maryland. We're going to talk about that for a few minutes. But we're going to have to first start by talking about New York. Now, I said before, New York was one of the first states to introduce Castle Doctrine in 1968. New York was also one of the first states, I don't know if it was the first state, but it was one of the first states to introduce concealed carry in 1911. Yes. So all the states that were introducing concealed carry in the late 90s. Okay. Now, New York State had a concealed carry law written around 1911. It was referred to as the Sullivan Act. It was named after Big Tim Sullivan, who was the absolute, unquestioned, most corrupt public official in all of New York State history. Keeping in mind, during the Civil War, we had defectors. Yes. Now, the Sullivan Act said that there is a good cause requirement to ask for a carry concealed license. You get a carry concealed license, but you have to have a good cause requirement. Now, back then there was no law against convicted felons bearing arms. There's an iconic photo of Malcolm X, who was a convicted felon, holding an M1 carbine with two 30-round magazines jungle clipped together. Speaking of the M1 carbine was invented by a convicted felon. The man who invented the carbine was a bootlegger. He spent 8 years in prison for accessory to murder because one of his accomplices murdered a police officer that was raiding the distillery. While in prison, he was working in a machine shop. Corrections officers brought their personal guns to him to be fixed. He began making guns in the fucking prison. The warden trusted him. When he got on parole after 8 years in prison, he opened up a shop and started making firearms. Yes, and this is a convicted felon. Now, many years ago, all of New York, in particular New York City, was corrupt. People think New York City is corrupt today. They don't know shit, okay? 70, 80, 90, 100 years ago, 90+% of NYPD was on the take. 90+%. Okay? Every politician, every police officer, they were all involved with organized crime. Gamblers, bootleggers, pimps, thugs, loan sharks, you name it, they were all in cahoots. All of them. Now, it is believed, according to legend, that the Sullivan Act was intended to keep immigrants from bearing arms. Keeping in mind, Tammany Hall was entirely Irish. The Irish hated the Italians, etc., etc. So the law was intended, allegedly, to stop immigrants from bearing arms, because no immigrant could claim good cause to bear an arm. Now, the Second Amendment said you could buy a gun, keep it in your house, but the good cause doctrine said if you have a good cause, you can carry it in the street. Now, keeping in mind that all of New York City was corrupt back then, good cause usually meant here's a brown paper bag full of money, or I helped campaign for the mayor, or I'll forget you're fooling around with a 12-year-old girl, or my uncle is your watch commander. Okay, and you literally had thugs, hooligans in New York City, of all places, carrying legally owned handguns, carry concealed, legal. Have you ever read the Godfather novel? Luca Brasi in the Godfather novel, it doesn't say it in the book, it says it in the novel only. Luca Brasi has a carry concealed license in New York City. It allegedly cost Don Corleone $10,000. Now, obviously Luca Brasi is a fictitious character, but the point is simple. That is underlying a fact, reflective of real life. Facts are real life. Criminals in New York City could get carry concealed licenses if they were connected. That way when a police officer stops them, all they gotta do is show the license and they move on. Obviously nowadays a criminal cannot have a gun. There are federal laws that mandate that it is a felony for a convicted felon to touch a gun, etc., etc., etc. So the good cause doctrine meant back then you were politically connected. Nowadays it takes on an entirely new meaning. Speaking of New York City, my father has a friend in Queens who used to own a few restaurants. Used to own a restaurant, at least one. Back in the 1970s, he had to take large sums of cash from his home to the restaurant, to the bank, and back and forth. He asked the city for a carry conceal license on the grounds he was carrying large quantities of money. It was approved. That's right. In the 1970s, he was legally running around New York City with a concealed handgun in a time period where people in Texas were threatened with state imprisonment for carrying guns concealed. Texas. There are some fanatically pro-gun from my cold dead hand states today that did not allow anyone to carry a gun concealed. Yes. How's that for fucking crazy? Now, in New York State, every county does their own license. Some counties upstate are like Texas. They're like the fucking Midwest. Farmlands, mountains, forest lands, rivers. It looks like you're in the middle of fucking nowhere. Okay? The land looks exactly the way it did when the pioneers saw it 250 years ago, 300 years ago. There are certain counties upstate New York that will give anybody an unrestricted carry license, no questions asked, blah, blah, blah. You ever see a Taxi Driver? The 8 3/8 inch barrel on that fucking Magnum? I could literally take that gun, put it on a shoulder holster, walk into one of these counties, and sit at a bar with the gun open. Open carry is not legal in New York State, but the problem is, as long as you're not hurting anybody, they don't give a shit. Every public official up there is a lifetime NRA member. They don't give a shit. Now, with the exception of New York City, all of New York State is shall issue. Now, before you have a heart attack, let me explain what that means. Remember the good cause doctrine? Some counties, the judge gives you the license. Some counties, the police commissioner. Some counties, the sheriff. One of those three. The judge gives you a carry conceal license almost automatically. They just stamp the fucking thing and give it to you. But the judge places what they call reasonable restrictions on your license, which means they will tell you where to carry, and you will not carry where they tell you not to. Okay. That's right. Now, if you wish to carry a gun wherever you want, completely disregarding the judge's rules, you can ask the judge for an unrestricted license. No New York City, no government buildings, no schools, and no airports. Aside from that, you're clean. Good cause? Okay. Many jurisdictions will tell you this. Prove to me that you are in more danger than the rest of the public. Did you witness a murder? Did you escape an abusive husband and did he threaten you? Are you being stalked? Why are you in visible danger? Danger that's more than the rest of the community. If you can prove that, they give you a full unrestricted carry license. Now, there were a couple of people in my county. I was not one of them, so don't look at me like that. I tell you if I was, though. These people wanted unrestricted licenses. Now, I don't know how they handle who gets what. I know that you bring your package to the White Plains city. What city? The city of White Plains, the county courthouse. The city of White Plains has an office inside the county courthouse. And they have a police detective in there, and he does your fingerprinting and your application, and he processes everything. After he's proven that you're not a convicted felon or a domestic abuser or a terrorist, he has a judge stamp your license. Now, I don't know if it's Monday, so this judge gets it. It's Wednesday, so this judge gets it. or if he just divides them up. I don't know how he does it. But he puts the license in front of the judge approves it. Now, these judges approve these licenses blindfolded, okay? If it's just an unrestricted license, they just stamp it and go, stamp it and go, stamp it and go. Now, if you want an unrestricted license, they look very carefully at it and they read it and they make a careful determination. Should I give it or shouldn't I give it? No. There were several people that were turned down for unrestricted. Coincidentally, all of these people, I think there were 3 or 4 of them, got the same judge. You don't see the judge in my county. Okay, in my county, the detective gives it to the judge for you. You almost never see the judge. Unless the judge specifically wants to talk to you. At that point, they have the right to clear your home. They have the right to call you into chambers. But I've never heard of that actually happening. And these people couldn't take no for an answer. They said, wait a minute, why can't we have unrestricted? Because you don't have a good substantial cause that you're in more danger than the rest of the public. Okay, good. So that's what they do. They go to Alan Gura. Now, who is Alan Gura? You may remember him from such lawsuits as Heller versus D.C. and Chicago versus Illinois. Alan Gura is a supreme lawyer. He's a very, very powerful lawyer that has subsequent partners in pretty much every state you can imagine. And Mr. Gura told his partner in this area to file a lawsuit against the state and the county and the 4 judges, or whatever the fuck it is. But because one judge specifically denied the licenses, the lawsuit is named after that judge. And this is a federal lawsuit. Now, the city of White Plains hosts a federal courthouse. It is literally right next door to the county courthouse where the judges sit. Excuse me. And arguments were heard last year. And the federal judge was an appointee of President Bush Jr. Now, the county judge said you can have a restricted license and you can buy a handgun and stuff, but I'm not giving you unrestricted. So the federal judge looked at Heller and Chicago. Heller and Chicago talk about handguns for defense. So this judge interpreted that as, okay, she couldn't, if the judge had said you can't own a handgun, then she would have been in trouble. But she just said you can't own a handgun, you just can't have an unrestricted license. So the judge ruled in the judge's favor. The Second Amendment does not give you a right to be armed outside your home. Good cause is constitutional. And they have a whole shit going on with the county was talking about protecting police officers and citizens are safe. We're not going to have any blood in the street. My county has a pro-gun county executive now, but these are other officials in the county, like, attorneys and shit like that. Okay? The most pro-gun state in the world can have an anti-gun politician. Just ask Harry Reid. Anyway, Mr. Gura never takes no for an answer. He told his subordinate attorney to file an appeal. And I think he filed the appeal before he left the courthouse that day. Now, also, Mr. Gura does not put all of his eggs in one basket. He can have up to 12 lawsuits at a time pending. And he has at least 7 lawsuits pending with pretty much every state that is not practicing shall issue. Which brings us to Maryland. Maryland, even though Maryland allows 20 rounds in a magazine, even though Maryland has a stand your ground law, see, New York State has a Castle Doctrine, but no stand your ground law. If you look at the Castle Doctrine, very, very fine print, you'll see there are a couple of circumstances in New York State that support stand your ground. Maryland has a stand your ground law, Castle Doctrine. Maryland does not allow you to have a loaded gun in your car, unless you have a carry conceal license. New York State allows you to have a loaded handgun in your car. Don't go to the 5 boroughs, don't go to schools, don't go to government buildings, don't go to airports. You can drive from one end of New York to the other with a loaded handgun in the car. At the ready, no big fucking deal. Maryland doesn't allow loaded guns in the car unless you have a carry license or unless you're a cop. Now, there was a gentleman in Maryland who was the victim of a home invasion. Remember I said the police usually take 6 minutes? Well, these police didn't watch my video. They took 2.5 hours. And the man applied for a carry conceal license. Now, other states, there's no restricted, unrestricted. You either carry or don't. And Maryland gave him a carry license, which is rare because Maryland is practicing no issue. Only very, very wealthy people, politically connected people, and people with high-risk jobs get carry licenses in Maryland. Very, very rare. So Maryland gave him a carry conceal license. The suspect went to prison, got out of prison, moved a few miles away from this gentleman. Every couple of years, you got to renew your license. It happens. You renew your driver's license, renew your passport, renew your library card. It happens. He went to renew his license. They turned him down. They said, you're no longer in danger. You no longer need a carry license. You can still have handguns. You can still carry handguns. You can still keep handguns in your home. But you cannot carry a gun concealed. So he went to Mr. Gura and the Second Amendment Foundation, and Mr. Gura's Maryland lawyer sued Maryland. Maryland got the exact opposite result as New York. The Maryland judge, Justice Legg, appointed by George Bush Sr. George Bush Sr. was a better president than his son, and he had better judicial appointments than his son. Now, before you criticize George Bush Jr. over his judicial appointments, do you know who President Ronald Reagan made a federal judge? I'll give you a clue. He has a porn star mustache and he sells machine guns to Mexican drug lords. Anyway, the Maryland judge said the Second Amendment does go beyond the home. You don't need good cause aside from the right as written in the law. Good cause is unconstitutional. Not under Maryland law, under U.S. law. State judge, state law. Federal judge, federal law. Good cause is unconstitutional in all the states. You have a right to protect yourself wherever you are. That might go well with states that don't have castle doctrine and stand your ground laws. We'll see. Now, you have two judges, one in New York, one in Maryland. I think they're at the same hierarchy. Remember when you were a kid, mom said one thing, dad said the other? And you went with the parent that told you what you wanted to hear? Yeah, you did. We all did. Don't look at me like that. Well, my reaction is, let's listen to the parent that told us what we want to hear. Okay. The New York law sided with the law. People are appealing. The Maryland law sided with the people. The law is appealing. It is alleged that the Attorney General of Maryland wants to appeal the ruling. He has usually 30 days. The ruling was March 5th. Today's March 9th. I'll be 30 tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Give me money. You usually have 30 days from the day the ruling is made. So that will give us, what, April 4th, April 5th. He should make an appeal if he wants to. And I think he does want to. So I was talking with the Second Amendment Foundation online. And the Second Amendment Foundation says that if a higher court gets in, it should spill over into other states. Now, experts believe the Maryland law may be upheld in favor of the people. We don't know. We have to wait and see. But we're on the board here. Because now you have a federal judge saying good cause is unconstitutional. And the Maryland law was almost identical to the New York law. So if it's unconstitutional here, it's unconstitutional there. So we don't know what to do. Now, in Maryland, the state police give you your license. Unlike New York, where every county is different. And lawmakers in Maryland are telling the state police to immediately start implementing the new law. The Attorney General is saying to them, hold off on implementing the new law, let me make an appeal. So now the Maryland State Police don't know whether to listen to mom or dad either. So we're going to see what happens. Now, a few years ago, the people of D.C. complained to a federal judge that they could not own handguns and could not keep their guns unlocked. And judge sided against them. They went to another court, judge this, judge that. They went back and forth. A federal court said to the people of D.C., you may legally own handguns. The city of D.C. didn't like the ruling. The Brady campaign told the city of D.C. to settle out of court. The city of D.C. didn't listen to the Brady campaign. Idiots never listen to one another. The city of D.C. complained to the Supreme Court in 2008, we have a right to deny our people the right to own handguns. The Supreme Court said, no, your people have a right to own a handgun. So the D.C. Supreme Court upheld, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the lower court's ruling and allowed D.C. residents to own handguns. So sometimes if you appeal, it ends up backfiring on you. So that may happen. Now, I want to show you something. 1 minute. Hold on. Okay, remember this book? Westchester County used to have a county executive. We voted him out in 2009. Getting cold, I think. Okay, Westchester County used to have a county executive who was anti-gun. Typical anti-gun politician. He carried a gun, he had bodyguards 24 hours a day. Westchester County had a law that said your guns must be locked up at all times. Most people didn't even know the law was in the books, myself included. So, now, in 2008, when Justice Scalia wrote this, it also requires any lawful firearm in the home be disassembled or bound by trigger locks at all times, rendering it inoperable. Okay, that means that Justice Scalia was saying that in addition to D.C. not allowing its residents to own handguns, they said any rifle or shotgun must be locked up, rendering it inoperable. And the D.C. law literally said your gun must be locked up so you can't use it for defense. That was overturned. The Supreme Court said it's unconstitutional to require someone to have their gun disabled because they have to defend themselves when the shit is the fan. And when Justice Scalia said that, the law in my county requiring your gun to be locked up, the law nobody listened to, was overturned. Okay? Now, Chicago. In 2008, Chicago said, I don't know their exact wording, but Chicago politicians said that 2008 Heller decision doesn't apply to us. I think they said something about our city laws are not bound by federal law. But they said that the federal laws, the U.S. Constitution does not apply to our city laws. So if you fail pre-K, go to Chicago and become the mayor. And Chicago said, we have a right to keep handguns banned. Other cities in Illinois had handguns banned, in addition to Chicago, and the Heller decision didn't apply to them. Remind me how that worked out 2 years later? Thank you. So, let's see what happens. Now, remember I said the good cause? Okay, well, back to New York for a minute. And this could be in any state. It's also in California, just so you know. Okay, ask Dianne Feinstein where she got her carry concealed license from. The New York law says that if you do not have good cause, you do not have to have an unrestricted license. Okay, so it is believed. This is in the rumor phase, and I talked to the Second Amendment Foundation, and I said, if this is provable, I want it to be proved. I want it to be discussed in court. Find these people and discuss it in the open. This is in the rumor phase now. The rumor phase said that in several places in New York State, including my own county, over the past couple of years, you would have someone who did not have good cause. So likewise, they're not getting an unrestricted license. Now, it is believed that there were people that had good cause. There were people in my area, in other parts of New York State, that were legitimately threatened. And their safety was in legitimate danger. And they too were turned down. I call that selective compliance. I do. Because the law says if they don't have a good cause, you can turn them down. Okay, good. But when they do have a good cause, you turn them down still. You're choosing to comply with the law when you want to. If that's true. I don't know if that's true yet. But if it's true, I want it to be discussed publicly. I want evidence to be heard. And I want the opposing side to have a right to respond to that. And I want that question answered. Now, I have a cold. I'm sniffing like a fucker, so excuse me. Convicted felons may not bear arms in the country anymore. They may not. But there is still room for political patronage. Now, the guy that the range director of my range, he used to live in New York City. He lived in New York City in the 70s. He lives in my hometown now. And he works my city. He works the range of the county as a city range. A few years ago, New York City issued a list of the people that have carry concealed licenses. Now, New York City is practicing no issue. New York City does not issue any license, restricted or unrestricted. In New York City, you have to have your gun locked up in your trunk when you're going into the range, ammunition up front, a la New Jersey, Hawaii, Illinois, Washington, D.C., just like that. Now, New York City is practicing no issue. Yet some people have carry concealed licenses. Well, how's this for size? There are, I've heard 30,000 carry concealed licenses in New York City out of 8 million people. Now, if you exclude retired police officers, let's exclude retired police officers. The people in New York City that have carry concealed licenses, it is a who's who of political cronyism. Okay? That list of people in New York City with carry concealed licenses, they're all celebrities or rich people or politicians or their bodyguards. Heath Ledger died in his apartment in 2008. Mary-Kate Olsen sent her bodyguard. He was carrying a gun. Donald Trump carries a gun. Montel Williams carries a gun. Howard Stern carries a gun. I think Robert De Niro, I heard his name mentioned. Steven Tyler from Aerosmith and Joe Perry used to live in New York City. It is alleged they carried guns. It's alleged, though. We don't know for sure, but it is alleged. Steven Tyler is from my hometown, believe it or not. He got expelled from my rival high school for drugs. That's public information, so don't worry about it. So the issue is this. Where the fuck is the good cause? Are these people in visible danger? You don't give anybody a carry conceal license at all on any level, yet there's a whole list of people that have carry licenses. And they're all celebrities and rich people. Tell me that's not political patronage. And my father had a friend a few years ago had a carry concealed license. He was politically connected. That conversation is going to end right there. It's not going any further. So, but here's the other aspect of it. The law, as it is written, excludes judges, prosecutors, and retired police officers. Okay? Sheriffs, police commissioners, and judges give out the license, and they are exempt from the law. So, you could be a police officer with LAPD, retire, move to my hometown, submit your paperwork to my county with proof that you are a retired police officer, without explaining anything other than you are a retired police officer. Here's the proof. You immediately get an unrestricted license, no questions asked. And you can bring your license and your gun with a 17-round magazine into New York City. Yes, a retired police officer from any police department in the country can go to New York City with a 17-round magazine in their concealed gun. So the law does not apply to the people enforcing it. You know how Rick Perry said, take Congress, cut their pay, send them home, and let them live in their home jurisdictions and let them follow the law that they write. Well, here's the issue. Maybe Rick Perry's got a point. Maybe retired police officers and judges and prosecutors should have the same restrictions we do. Just a thought. But that's the problem with May issue. Every time you have May issue, there's always a problem. There's always a possibility of political patronage and corruption. Now, the judges that are being sued, I have no proof that they themselves are on the take. I have no proof of that at all. None. But there is reason to believe other licensing officers throughout history have been corrupt. And still are to this day. So let's see what happens. Thank you.